joining us right now. No stranger to the show, and it was great to see him up here at MLS Cup. Ives Galarcep, Soccer by Ives. Ives, welcome, my friend.
Hey, Anthony, how you doing?
I'm very good. And Ives, just before we get going and talking about the Combine and the rumors, it was great having you up here with Franco Panizzo and a lot of your staff. I'm glad you had a great time in our great city of Toronto, and it was a pleasure finally meeting you, and it was wonderful to see all the people all over MLS come up here to Toronto.
No, I appreciate it. It was great. It was a great time. It's been about 6 years since I've been up there, so it was a lot of fun. It was a great week and just a great event overall.
Let's talk about the Combine, Ives. I watched both games yesterday. Two lopsided results, to say the least, and it looked like the two sides that lost really struggled in the back end there. But we saw some guys that really their stock rose. Obviously, here a lot of people were watching Adonijah Reed with A&B Academy, and also a couple of the other ones like Shamit Shomi. Let's get your thoughts on them, and then we'll talk about a couple other players. What did you like, and what were you concerned about either one of those players?
Well, I'd say the positive for Reed is the fact that he really didn't look out of place. And, you know, when you're talking about the youngest player in the draft, the 17-year-old kid, you know, it could have been easy for him to kind of get overwhelmed, but he fit right in. He was confident. He was aggressive. He played well in the attack. And I think he might have, you know, answered some questions from people who weren't that familiar with him. Obviously, in Canada, they know him well, but a lot of the American teams probably aren't that aware of him as a prospect, as a talent, and I think what they saw was you know, he's a project. Obviously, he's someone you're gonna have to put some time into, but he looked the part, and I think that it was a very positive first day for him. As far as Show Me goes, it was a tough situation for him because the team that he was on was really bad, and he struggled to kind of make his mark because the players around him just weren't at a good level. I give him credit. I really thought he tried to find the game, and at times he showed some qualities where you could see why people in Canada are so high on him. But I do think he's going to have to kind of step it up in these next two games to really show the non-Canadian teams what he can bring to the table. I'm sure some of the teams know about him. Obviously, a team like Minnesota United, familiar with NASL, and I'm sure they saw him. But I think there's a lot of teams that still have some questions about him.
Let's talk about a guy who I thought was going to show us more, and he got burned a couple times, if I'm not mistaken, by Delgado. That's Aubrey from Notre Dame. Talk about him.
Yeah, he obviously, of the top prospects coming in, he had the worst first day. But I wouldn't go, you know, dropping him off the draft board just because he had a bad day. I think I pointed it out in my piece for Goal.com that, you know, there's a track record of some of the top defenders in the Combine's history who have struggled on day one. And, you know, whether it's Omar Gonzalez or last year Jonathan Campbell. So, you know, I wouldn't go writing off Aubrey just yet. I don't think teams are necessarily dropping him off, especially the teams that are familiar with him and that saw him all year, Notre Dame, and have scouted him. So I think he'll be okay. You know, I think he's still there. He's still one of the top defenders, definitely, and one of the top seniors. I think he'll still be one of the top guys.
Let's talk about Lewis. He lived up to a lot of people, what they expected from him. I think he'll go real high in the draft. Your thoughts?
Which, Jonathan Lewis?
Jonathan Lewis, the goal scorer. I think he had 2 or 3 goals yesterday.
I think he had 2. He looked good, you know, and again, another younger player. He was only a freshman last year for Akron. He tied for the nation lead in assists, but he showed his explosiveness. He showed his quickness, and I think teams wanted to see that, how he fit in, and I think he boosted his stock. And for me, he's in my big board before the Combine started. I had him as number 5 overall, and I think he solidified that place. I think he's now edging himself ahead of maybe some other guys who were ahead of him, like for me, like a Jackson Ewell, who a lot of people are very high on. But if you're asking me to pick between Ewell and Lewis, I'm probably going to go Lewis right now.
I'm surprised because that's the next guy I was going to talk to you about from Team Control was Ewell. I was quite impressed with the guy. I mean, obviously, here's another guy that had a lot of pressure on him to produce and to show what he's all about, and I think he did all right.
He's a tiny player. I mean, I don't think he played badly. I just think that he was pretty quiet for much of that game. He connected his passes. He took a nice goal at the end, but I think for me, some of the people that he is in competition with did better than him as far as guys that are in that range, in that 3 to 7 range. Because, I mean, I don't think he's going to be the number 1 overall pick. I don't think he'll be the number 2 overall pick, but I think he's going to fall in that 3 to 7 range, and I just think a guy like Lewis looked better than he did. So I think from that standpoint, it was a kind of a negative day for him, but I still think he showed why people were high on him. He can definitely play.
Out of all four teams, which was the goalkeeper that stood out in your mind that could go the top pick in the draft coming up, Ives?
No, well, Eric Klonowski is the head and shoulders top goalkeeper in this draft, and I'll give Robert Moyes credit, the Duke goalkeeper. He obviously had a lot to do behind a bad defense and a bad team, but Klonowski's the guy. He's the guy who, for me, I think he's the best goalkeeper prospect we've had in the draft since Andre Blake. I think he's that good, and I'm not saying he's as good as Andre Blake, but I think in the last couple of years we haven't seen a prospect as good as he is, and I'm actually surprised that the league hasn't signed him yet. He was at Everton recently on trial. He obviously can't get a work permit in England, but I heard some good things about him. And you see him; he's 6'6". He's good with his feet. There's some questions about strength-wise, is he sturdy enough to deal with the rigors of the pro game? But I think a lot of teams are really high on him. And I know for me, he's definitely a top 8 talent. I think he'll go in the top 10. I think some team that needs a goalkeeper is going to move up to get him.
Nifty, nice player in Delgado yesterday. Watching him, we talked about him just a little bit before in how he exposed Aubrey there. I was impressed with Delgado. I like what he brings to the table.
Well, Delgado's been a steady goal scorer for several years now at Delaware. It's always been the question, is it the level that he's playing? How good is he? Can he do better against higher level competition? And obviously that was a good test for him, and he also tested well in the performance testing. So I think he's answered some questions he needed to answer, and I think because of that he is moving up on draft boards. I don't think he's a first rounder yet, but if he keeps this up, I think he could do well. And I would say this, to be fair, he was playing in front of an amazing midfield. I think you could have put any of the forwards in the draft in the combine in front of that midfield, and I think they would have had some good chances. But not to take anything away from him, he did well, and he definitely helped the start.
Lastly, before we move off the combine, another Canadian kid, Chris Nanko, comes from Sigma here in Ontario. We know he's had a wonderful NCAA career. Here's a guy that I think showed a lot of people when he came in that second half that he could help someone. And this is not a project. This is a guy I believe can step in with some minutes off the bench for a team maybe like an Atlanta, maybe like a Minnesota, maybe like a San Jose. Your thoughts, Ives?
I think he's definitely a sleeper. I think it impressed me that he saw an opportunity to go right at one of the top guys in the draft, and Chris Adui asked him, and he really took it to him. And their one-on-one battle was one of the best battles of the day, and he really showed some quality there. So I think he's someone who he's still kind of a sleeper. I think he's kind of one thing with Nanko is that early on when I did my first big board, I had him pretty high. I had him like around 25, but now with Generation Adidas Canada, and now with a player like Brian Wright, there are actually several Canadians in this pool now, and I think it kind of maybe hurts him a little bit in that there's other Canadian options out there. So I think he's going to slip because of that. But if he has a couple more good combine days, I think he's definitely going to get drafted. I think the question is, will he be drafted in the third round or will he be taken in the second round?
Let's talk about the rumors. Let's talk about the things that are happening out there. A lot of people are staying in the same hotel. Coaches, general managers are arriving, talking to one another. What are you hearing about Atlanta? It's apparently that they want to move their pick. They're also trying to make a splash to bring another player in from overseas. We're hearing also that San Jose wants to do a lot of things and start to really attract some name players, and they want to hand out some big money. What are you hearing, Ives?
Well, as far as Atlanta goes, Atlanta and Minnesota are in the same boat in the sense that they both see that there's definitely right now a market. It's a seller's market. A lot of teams want to move up in this draft. They want to move up into the top spots. And if you're Minnesota and you're Atlanta, I think they're both open to making trades. I don't think either Atlanta or Minnesota are married to holding on to their pick, and I think they both see opportunities to trade down and get some value. So I think it all depends. It starts with Minnesota. They have the top pick. They're definitely open to trading it. I know sometimes expansion teams want to keep that top pick from a symbolic standpoint to have that first player that they draft, but Minnesota's a little different. They already have a history. They already have players that their fans are familiar with who are going to be with the team. So I think if you ask me, I think Minnesota makes the trade, and then Atlanta also could make a trade because you have a couple of really highly regarded prospects in Miles Robinson, in Abu Danladi, Jeremy Ebobisse. Those three guys are the players that people want, especially Miles Robinson. I think Robinson has a lot of fans out there who see some real potential in him. And Abu Danladi, I think he boosted his stock again. I think he answered some questions. So for me, that's the top two right now. And Ebobisse just got here today, so he didn't play on Sunday, but he'll show what he can do on Tuesday. But right now it's Robinson and it's Dunlady 1-2.
Let's talk about San Jose. We're hearing a lot of things coming out of their camp. They're going to spend some big money and try to attract a big name or two with a new general manager and a guy that is really trying to stir things up. What are you hearing in regards to San Jose?
Well, I haven't heard anything specific as far as names or players. I thought it was an interesting hire. Obviously, if you make that hire, it's because you do plan to get more serious on the international market or specifically the European market to land some impact, big ticket players. They haven't always had the most success on that front, and they need that. Obviously, you have the beautiful new stadium. You want to make an impact in that market. You have Sacramento down the road. If they get expansion in Sacramento, that'll be right nearby. So if you're San Jose, I think there's definitely some pressure there to put together a more attractive team. They've not always been the most fun team to watch, and I think that's something that needs to change. We'll see if this GM can deliver, right? I mean, he's been hired to help deal with that, and I'm skeptical about the hire, but we'll see what he brings. We'll see what he delivers, and I think the pressure's on him. He's got to deliver some star players.
Let's talk about the three Canadian teams before we let you go, Ives. Piatti being linked to Boca Juniors. A lot of smoke there, but really, I believe there's not much to it. I think that Saputo will really try to impress upon him to stay. And then TFC, obviously, Will Johnson leaving, and obviously a couple holes that they want to try and fill. The Whitecaps haven't done very much in the offseason. Let's talk about first Montreal, TFC, and then Vancouver in your mind.
I don't think Piatti's going to go. Obviously, Boca Juniors has a ton of money they're sitting on after the Carlos Tevez sweepstakes going to China. But I don't know if they're going to necessarily splash the cash for a Piatti. So, my money's on him staying. As far as TFC goes, I don't know what big moves they have in line right now. I think they're pretty happy with the team they have, and they obviously have some good talent coming up the pipeline, some young players, and they're sitting pretty in the sense that they obviously have talent in their development system, but they have some pretty good positions in this draft. And I think with Tim Bezichenko and the crew they have there, I think they're positioned pretty well to get some talent in this draft that could give them some good depth, and I think they're actually in a pretty good position. And their team, it wouldn't shock me if they trade up. I think if Toronto, if the right situation is there for them, I think they wouldn't mind moving up to get a right back, one of the better right backs in this draft. So I think they're a team that you want to watch on draft day. As far as Vancouver, obviously they're in a situation where they're not going to spend a ton of money. They're kind of one of those budget teams, one of those teams that has kind of the tight purse string. So Carl Robinson's got a bit of a tough task there because other teams are obviously making their big moves and bringing in kind of high profile players or even TAM players. And Vancouver, you're still waiting to see what kind of moves they're going to make. You lose a Pedro Morales. Are you going to go get somebody to kind of replace what they lost with him? Even not until they lost him a year ago, because last year I felt like he didn't really do much. But we'll see, man. Vancouver, this could be the year that they go from kind of hanging around the middle to falling toward the bottom of the pack. Just because in this league, I don't know if you can get away with not spending the way they've kind of gotten away with it. And they've kind of stayed in that middle. I don't know if they're going to be able to hang there, given what some other teams are doing.
As we exit, I forgot to ask you this, but I want to get your quick thoughts on the NASL, USL, and what's happened there, making them now the Division II, as U.S. Soccer talked about last week, and what you think. Is this a good moment in U.S. Soccer? Is it a moment that a lot of people are going to look back and say, this was the wrong move? What's your quick thoughts on that?
Well, I wouldn't say good moment, but I think it was the right decision. Because obviously NASL, they fell apart in some ways, but there was still potential there to salvage it, and you kind of didn't want to see that lost, right? I think when you have a team like the Cosmos and the potential that they have, if you had dropped them down to Division III, then the Cosmos would have ceased. They would have gone out of business. They would not have existed anymore. And NASL, who knows what would have happened to the league? So I think it was a good compromise because now NASL has the chance to rebound, rebuild. They obviously have some new leadership, and I have some real questions about their commissioner, their previous commissioner, Bill Peterson. I think he really has a lot to answer for. I think he is, if you want to kind of put the blame on somebody or finger somebody, he has to take that blame for the way things went with NASL, and I think they just really had the wrong approach. They obviously got a little blind to the idea of trying to take on MLS, and they kind of didn't focus on making sure that their foundation was strong. And I think it cost them. But credit to U.S. Soccer, they've given them a reprieve now. And I think there's potential there for that league to kind of get back on its feet. USL is obviously doing great things. They're growing, expanding. They're running a really good operation. They still have room to grow. They're not there yet, but they're heading in a good direction. And right now, it's kind of a competition to see as far as those two leagues go. They're both quote-unquote Division II. Now we're going to see this year how they both take it to that next step to kind of get ahead of each other in that race to end up being the number 2 league in North America.
One of the most influential people in North American soccer. We thank you so much again, Ives, for joining us here on Red Card. Have a great new year and keep up the great work at Soccer by Ives with all your staff. And it was great seeing you up here in Toronto, my friend.
Hey, Anthony, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Anytime you need me, I'll be there.